Michael Carter never planned to be a father. He had spent most of his life avoiding attachments, first after his parents' deaths, then after losing his wife, Laura. But after that stormy night at St. Mark's, something inside him changed. 6 small faces now filled the quiet house on Ridgewood Lane. 6 voices, 6 tiny beds, 6 lives depending on a man who had never changed a diaper in his life. And though the world saw chaos, Michael saw purpose. The first morning after the adoption was pure confusion. Jonah cried for hours. Grace refused to eat unless all her brothers were seated beside her. Ethan had somehow climbed onto the kitchen counter, and Caleb was trying to feed cereal to the family cat. Michael stood in the middle of it all, apron half-tied, coffee gone cold, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. But then Daniel, quiet and serious, tugged on his sleeve and said softly, "Sir, are you gonna stay?" That single question hit him harder than any storm. He bent down, looked Daniel in the eyes and said, "Yeah, buddy, I'm not going anywhere." And from that moment, those words became a promise. In a town where everyone knew everyone, 6 new children, black children, suddenly appearing in a white man's home stirred talk. At the grocery store, people whispered. At the diner, they stared. Some even crossed the street when Michael and the kids walked by. But Michael never flinched. When a reporter once asked, "Why them?" he smiled and said, "Because love doesn't check skin color before it shows up." Still, the judgment stung. The kids noticed the stares, the murmurs, the questions they couldn't yet understand. One afternoon, Grace, barely 4, asked, "Daddy, why do they look at us funny?" Michael paused. "Because they don't know our story," he said softly. "Then tell them," she said. He smiled. "One day, sweetheart. I will." Raising 6 toddlers alone was like fighting a never-ending battle with exhaustion. Michael worked 2 jobs, days at the factory, nights mopping library floors. He'd come home after midnight, sometimes collapsing on the couch still in his work clothes. Some nights, when the bills piled too high, he'd stare at the adoption papers and wonder if love was really enough. But every doubt vanished when one of the children came running into his arms. Jonah once woke from a nightmare, sobbing until Michael lifted him. "It's okay, son," he whispered. "No one's leaving you." That night, he realized he needed them as much as they needed him. Winter of 1992 hit hard. The kids caught a severe flu that swept through the town. One by one, they fell sick, fevers, coughs, sleepless nights. Michael barely slept for days, moving from one bed to another, wiping foreheads, whispering comfort. When Grace's fever climbed dangerously high, he rushed her to the hospital. The nurse at the counter looked confused when he said, "She's my daughter." "You mean foster daughter?" she asked. Michael's eyes flashed. "No," he said firmly. "My daughter." He stayed by Grace's bedside all night, holding her hand as machines beeped softly around them. When she finally opened her eyes and whispered, "Daddy," he broke down in tears. It was the first time any of the 6 called him that. That spring, Michael made a vow. He bought a cheap second-hand camera and started recording everything: birthdays, Sunday breakfasts, laughter, even the chaos of spilled milk and broken toys. He wanted them to have proof that they were loved, that they belonged, that someone had chosen them. He labeled the first tape, Year 1, the Carter 6. That tape would later be the start of a series of recordings that spanned over 2 decades. A living memory of love overcoming everything. Word of Michael's unusual family began to spread beyond Detroit. One Sunday, a local church visited, bringing clothes and toys. The pastor said, "We've never seen a man do what you're doing, Mr. Carter. You're a blessing." He shrugged. "I'm just doing what any father would do." Soon, volunteers began showing up, neighbors, teachers, even strangers. One woman, Mrs. Lang, came every Friday with a pot of soup and spent hours reading to the children. Another donated new shoes for Grace after seeing her worn-out pair. Kindness had started to return to Ridgewood Lane. By the time the Carter 6 turned 5, the small house had become a real home. Michael decorated the living room with balloons, baked 6 cupcakes from scratch, and wrote their names in uneven icing. "Happy birthday, my miracles." he said as the children blew out their candles together. Grace leaned across the table and whispered, "Daddy, now we're really a family, right?" Michael smiled, tears filling his eyes. "We always were, sweetheart." When the kids started kindergarten, new challenges arrived. Daniel excelled, quiet, brilliant, observant. Ethan got into fights. Caleb couldn't sit still. Jonah was shy. Samuel cried when separated from his siblings. And Grace, she was fiercely protective of all of them. One day, when a classmate mocked Jonah's stutter, Grace stood up and shouted, "Don't talk about my brother like that." She was sent to the principal's office. But Michael, instead of scolding her, simply said, "You did the right thing. We defend each other." From that day, the school learned something. The Carter kids weren't just siblings. They were a unit. In 1995, when the children were 6, something unexpected arrived in the mail. A letter addressed to the Brooks children. Michael froze. He hadn't heard that name in years. The letter had no return address, just shaky handwriting and a faint smell of lavender. Inside was a single page. "To whoever is raising them, thank you. I pray every day that they're safe. Tell them their mother never stopped loving them. Angela Brooks." Michael sat in silence for a long time, staring at the paper. He didn't tell the children, not yet. They were too young to understand. But that night, he placed the letter in his top drawer and whispered, "I'll keep your promise, Angela. I'll make sure they grow up knowing love." By 1997, life had settled into a rhythm. Michael had been promoted at the factory, and with the help of donations, he expanded the house, 2 extra rooms and a backyard swing set. The Carter 6 were now 8 years old, full of energy and mischief. One Saturday, Michael took them to a nearby park. As they played, a stranger approached him. "You're the man from the papers, right? The one who adopted 6 kids." Michael nodded. The man smiled. "My wife and I couldn't have children. You made us believe we still could have a family, just differently. We adopted 2 last year." For the first time, Michael realized the ripple his decision had caused. One act of love had inspired another. And another. That night, as he tucked Grace into bed, she asked softly, "Daddy, do we have another mommy somewhere?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. She loved you very much." Grace smiled sleepily. "Then maybe she's watching us now." He kissed her forehead. "I think she is." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Michael thought he heard a whisper, "Thank you." Years later, a journalist revisited the Carter home for a story on adoption. On the wall above the couch hung a framed photograph. 6 smiling children, arms around a tired but happy man. Below it, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Family isn't who you're born to, it's who never leaves." Michael Carter never sought recognition. He never called himself a hero. He just kept a promise made in the middle of a storm. A promise to never let love die. And because of that, 6 children who were once forgotten learned that love doesn't just find you. Sometimes, it fights through the storm to reach you. He didn't just adopt them, he raised a legacy.